Hey, everybody, this is Freddy Rodriguez.
And I'm Wilmer Valderrama.
It's the Dos Amigos podcast.
Welcome back to Dos Amigos podcast. Only everywhere you get your podcasts, as we say.
That's right.
Thank you to our beautiful family at iHeart podcast and our home at My Cultura podcast network.
Yes.
This is a podcast you can not only listen to, but you can watch.
You can watch
If you're
it.
watching, you already know that part.
That's
but
right.
if you're listening, you can go find us at YouTube and enjoy this stuff.
They can enjoy how straight your hat is.
Yes, that was my... How dare you? So the first question, which I think is my biggest pet peeve, like I was like, if I'm on TV with a crooked hat, it's embarrassing to try to talk about some stuff that matters.
Uh-huh.
Like I can't talk about serious stuff when my hat is like...
Because you're paying.
Like, yes.
Attention to that.
So anyways, really cool to be back with everyone here.
Yeah.
Freddy, I miss you when we're not in the same room together. Please don't make it weird. Well, it's too late. He made it weird. But today, I thought, we could start with something kind of fun, and the reason why I call it fun is because I think it's always so telling and so, so philosophical when we go into some of these moments in entertainment that kind of not only made us but shaped us. And we've done a lot of that in our internal, search for each other's histories and our trajectory in the industry. But now, as we think about it, like a fan, can I be a fan here? Can I say, hey, what are these movies that as a moviegoer we look at and somehow we see recreated over and over and over again? Like a lot of people find these iconic movies, right, that we grew up watching. And today, this next generation is almost watching them for the first time. And really, they don't know that these movies have been reskinned after original movies that were the first one of its kind. And now they're like, it's like this kind of prototype. So they make the same movie with new characters, right?
Yeah.
But without going too political, deep diving on the state of affairs of our industry right now, where, IP and reboots and sequels and prequels are so popular because they just can't trust original content today. I thought that would be really fun for us to kind of go down a list of 4 movies each.
Yeah.
You think of 4 movies that really changed the paradigm of how you saw film making and they made you love the movies.
Right.
And we'll break it down one by one. You say one, I say one, and then you're like, we kind of like, let's see where we meet in the middle when it comes to these movies, because we might have the same movie in mind, right? But
that's true.
But I guess, do you want to start? Or you want me to start?
Sure.
Yeah, you start.
I'll start. Okay. My top movie is Goodfellas. Okay. Now, it's always hard for me, like when people go, what are your top 4 or 5, right? Because you have like hardcore cinephiles out there who are judging you, and like I judge my top 4 movies in the category of movies that I've seen 30. If I've watched this movie 30 times, then to me that's one of my favorite movies, right? There's no rhyme or reason behind it.
Or if it's on TV, you have to finish it.
Oh yeah,
you can't get in the car. Like you're gonna be late because you gotta watch it.
It's one of those movies that I feel like it's fresh every time I see it, And I'll tell you a story behind that movie. When I first saw that movie. That movie came out my freshman year of high school, and I went to art school. And I had a friend who would get us into the movie theater for free, okay? And it was called the Webster Theater in Bucktown, Chicago. And back then in Chicago, you would go to one theater, and if you want to be sneaky, you sneak to another theater, then you sneak to another theater, especially when you're like 15 years old, right? And so I was doing that, and I went to one, and I saw another one, and I snuck into this theater, and Goodfellas was starting. It was like right at the first frame. I had no idea what I was getting into. I sat down, that opening scene comes on, Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci in the car. They hear Frank Vincent's character in the trunk. They stop the car. They get out. Joe Pesci whips out this big kitchen knife, and he just starts stabbing Frank Vincent in the trunk. I was 15 years old, 14, and I'd never seen anything like that in cinema.
Yeah.
And I was riveted, man. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move a muscle. And I sat there and I watched that 2-3 hour movie without going to the bathroom, without moving, nothing. I paid attention to every single frame of that film. And it changed my perspective in movies forever.
Did it wake up something else in you? Like did you not know that was possible in filmmaking?
I just knew that I was watching something profound.
Right.
I knew nothing really about movies. I wasn't a cinema buff. I wasn't a movie, you know. But I knew that I was watching something different. I knew that I was watching something of greatness. And my instinct told me that really early on in my life. And so it was like a tuning fork, right? And so now I wait for that tuning fork to rear its head every time I watch a movie to see if it's telling me if this movie is great or not. And that was the first one. And it changed my life. Wow. And I got to tell Frank Vincent that story too, man, one day before he passed away. God bless him. And he was like, oh, thank you, man. Thank you. You know, and I was like, dude, your movie changed my life. You know, I got to be a judge at the Tribeca Film Festival and I got to like tell them about that film, but it was transformative.
Oh my God. It's so amazing that you said that. I watched that movie in Spanish.
How was that in Spanish?
It's interesting because the performances are like, it probably hits harder in English, you know?
Yeah.
But regardless, the movie was so undeniable, right? And then I watched it in English and I was like, boom.
Yeah.
Like it just hit me in so many different ways. I never thought, like seeing performances like that.
Yeah.
You know, and performances like that weren't uncommon, right? Like you watch the 70s and even a few movies in the 60s. Like I think like The Lost Weekend.
Yeah.
That's a movie that kind of changed.
The Lost Weekend.
Yeah. It was a movie about, so what the movie's about. The movie was about this writer. The actor was Ray Milland.
Yeah.
And his performance was so, and I was taken back by the fact that it was black and white, and
the movie was black and white.
And because I was like, this movie had to be one of the darkest movies of that time, and it was. I think it won an Oscar too. It was nominated for multiple Oscars, and the movie was about this writer who has lost his way. And, you know, he was standing in front of his typewriter and he just couldn't start this page. And, you know, he was an alcoholic, you know, and he would go back to this one girl. And I believe she was, you know, a prostitute.
Right.
But he was like telling her everything, you know, that she wanted to hear. And just like at the end, we just ask her for money so he can go drink. And it was really dark, and the relationship was so complicated. And I was just like, whoa, this is such a specific story. And I recommend everybody to watch it because that was one of those first movies. And I'm not like the guy who like, let's go back to the 60s and like, you know, let's watch these movies. I'm not, you know, yes, I love cinema, and I've definitely dabbled in my later years in understanding where cinema really, you know, broke the ground. But this was one of those movies that like I watched it one day and it just absolutely fractured what was possible. And I was like, if that tone was possible then,
right,
I realized everything that was possible after.
So you feel that it was the tone or the execution that resonated with you as opposed to like somebody's singular performance?
Yeah, I mean, their performances they were incredibly grounded.
Right.
They were humbling and they were fracturing. They were very grounded, you know, like for that time, you know, everybody, well, you know, talk like this,
right,
you know what I mean? They were like that Hugh Grant, that kind of, you know, mentality, but I mean, vibe and tone. So I was taken back by movies that was black and white, and those performances were almost just so real. And I think it was a groundbreaking enough that it got nominated for multiple Oscars. But you know, I go back to the Goodfellas, you know, and I think about these performances were so liberating. You know, I felt like they were drawing with colors, and they were, you know, the way they were using the words, the way they would talk to each other and finish each other's sentences. It was a different level of groundedness, and I think that movie definitely touched me as well.
Do you think that like synergy has something to do with it, right? Because you know we've been making movies and TV for 30 years, right? And I've found that you could have a singular good performance, right? Or you could have somebody write a really good story, but there's something about when, you know, that term when the planets align, right? like the planets are aligned, and there's a certain synergy that comes from the performance and the directing and the writing and the overall the editing.
Perfect storm.
Yeah. That's what I felt like when I was watching that movie. Like there was this perfect synergy happening from all aspects of filmmaking. Where sometimes I'll watch a movie and I'll go, well, that dude's performance is awesome, but like there's something off about the editing or somewhere else,
or the rhythm, and I think it's also when you think about Goodfellas and you think about the generation of gangster films, the Italian, kind of genre, the American Italian, that was out here doing it. And you talk about The Godfather, right? And The Godfather and Godfather 2, where De Niro is playing, we're seeing him become, who he's gonna be, and that those performances had this rhythm, and I think the culture really enhanced what these characters had to offer in the narrative tone, right? I think like that's the other thing.
The culture in the movie or the culture in
the Italian culture on screen, right? I mean, like
literally the culture.
For an actor to fall back into their character traits, their values, and speak authentically about what their values are. Because you talk about The Godfather, these guys were real gentlemen, right? They were men of their word, they were loyal, and until others weren't.
Yeah.
And so that kind of stuff I really resonated as a Latino, and as a brown man I could really relate to some of the values, the family values, the spirituality part of it and all that stuff. So but I think culturally, I think that those characters really, just really came to life because they've rooted it softly in who they were as individuals as well, right? Like their culture. And I think that's when it gets really unique, when an actor really performs to their strengths, and leaning on what they really do know. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I feel like Goodfellas to me also felt like you were watching something you weren't supposed to,
Yeah, it was definitely some like inside, something felt inside about it.
Different world.
As opposed to like watching like a regular mobster movie, which I'm sure all of it has its levels of authenticity to it, right? But there was something that was different about that one. That at 15 years old absolutely floored me like nothing has ever floored me before.
Okay, so we have The Lost Weekend. And we have Goodfellas. What's your next one?
Carlito's Way. Yeah, man. God. Carlito's Way.
Shout out to Luis Guzman.
Shout out to Luis. Louis from the hood. And to John Ortiz and John Seda, who's in that movie, and Leguizamo, who's in that movie, and all that. I recently, and that's a whole other subject.
That's a different episode. Let's talk about Carlito's Way.
Look, it's a tough subject matter, but I try to watch that movie objectively, right? I try to watch it with no preconceived notions going in. I just love the movie, man. There was something different about that movie, the way that the director used music, an original score with that movie. It was almost poetic. That I felt that these other movies didn't use. And by
the way, those other movies, there was rarely music. The music would come in at very specific moments of the act.
Yeah,
right? Or like taking you from one act to the other. That's when like.
Yeah, I had that and Godfather, or even like Goodfellas, where Scorsese was also sort of a music buff, right? So he used very specific music cues in that. But go back and listen to the original score in Carlito's Way, and it's beautiful, man. It's this beautiful strings and something that you wouldn't expect to be in the background of something as gritty as like a film like that. And I think the movie is beautiful and it's poetic, and I know people have different opinions about Pacino and his performance and him not being Puerto Rican,
right,
all that stuff. But it still resonates with me, man. I could go home and watch it tonight and watch it like it's my first time watching it.
I mean, since we're in the gangster of it all, I think I'll match you.
Yeah.
Just as much of a controversial movie. Scarface.
Dude, I just rewatched that movie, bro.
Come on, man.
From the first.
Come on, dude.
I just rewatched it. I always say to myself, I've been going on this journey, and I've been watching movies as an adult. Mm-hmm. You ever watch movies now as an adult?
Oh yeah.
Not as a kid, not as like, I'm gonna go watch Scarface, like the sensationalism of it. Have you watched it now as an adult? You have. And what do you think?
I mean, there's a couple of things, right?
Yeah.
So Scarface to me felt like these two characters, like, they kind of breezed through the immigration part of it, the camps and whatever and all that stuff. And, and they really painted a picture that these Cubans were here like just messing things up, right?
Yeah.
And then it was like just an unhinged interpretation of two dudes that were just out there doing whatever they wanted to do,
Yeah.
And but it's an interesting question. You say we watched it as an adult.
Yes.
Like, how did it speak to me on that level? And I think I felt like that era, this analog era of pay phones and convertible Cadillacs and like pastel colors in Miami, felt like a different planet. And somehow I allowed it in my mind, or gave it license to exist, not just rent free, but like no questions asked. I just went along for the ride, and I didn't have to like poke holes on it because I was like, it brings me back to like the first time I saw it.
At the sensationalism of it?
Yeah. Because it's so big.
Yeah.
Say hello. Like, what the hell?
But wasn't Miami kind of big at that time?
Yeah,
like
larger than life, right? Like the open silk shirts and and all that. And
so do you think that maybe it was just an interpretation of what was really happening there? I mean, look, are people in a mansion like with a big ass gun like that? Like
maybe back then, who knows? It was Miami. I think everyone was probably locked and loaded or something.
But a reflection of like the externalism of like how people were, right, and how
it just feels to me like it was this grounded world.
Yeah.
The movie was a grounded world. And then they told Pacino, step on it. Or Pacino just said, I'm going to play something so different that you've ever seen me do.
Yeah.
This is a different boss. It's a different gangster he was playing, right? Like, so he just said, I'm going to play Cuban. I'm
a little more external.
Yeah, it has to be a little more external because because every other gangster he played was so internal. I mean, I go back to Scarface.
Paul Mooney?
2? I'm sorry, not Scarface 2. I go back to Godfather 2.
Yeah.
My God. Godfather 2 was so settled in the eyes.
Yeah.
He was saying monologues with his eyes. People were talking around him and the camera was just on him.
Yeah.
And then you go to Scarface and he's just like filling up the 70 millimeter like lens. Like he's just filling it up. So I think that Al Pacino was making choices to go far. Because if I'm going to play another gangster, I'm going to go as far as possible.
Yeah.
So it's a different type of gangster. And I think he went very far.
Yeah. And it kind of, I don't know, man. It obviously works, right? Because people to this day are wearing Scarface T-shirts and jackets, and at the time it got panned, right? The film got panned, his performance got panned. But I feel like sometimes people make these bold choices as an actor, right?
Yeah.
And people crap on it in the beginning, and then it needs to sort of live in the ether, and then people are like, oh, I know it's kind of big, but it's big, but it's still grounded at the same time.
And I think critics and cinema has become more and more cynical.
Yeah.
I think over time, every decade we fracture fantasy and we fractured boldness and we fracture originality.
Yeah.
And when something is that different or that bold, and it doesn't fit a mold that everyone's leading into, this is the trend of settledness or independent film making or whatever, then all of a sudden it becomes like not good, And there's something to be said about the different cinematic narratives that actually are needed to tell very specific stories. And original content should be given the freedom to be at whatever frequency they need to be to tell us, what this is about. And I think for him, what really worked for me is that the world was very real for Scarface, but he had to play someone that was a lunatic. He was just crazy and delusional, and that so you had to see him unhinged. I mean, one of my favorite scenes in Scarface is when he's in the restaurant and he gets drunk, and Michelle Pfeiffer is there, and he's just like, say hello to the bad guy. That part, like, that was uncomfortable. That was like, that was grounded and real, and that he really sold that moment for me.
I know somebody who's done that in a restaurant, like completely made a scene. And so when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I've seen that.
Wow. Yeah.
There's a lot of that stuff that's real, man. I unfortunately grew up in a neighborhood somewhat similar, and there's some big characters in those neighborhoods and who are a part of that world and that underworld. I mean, people who are really external. Growing up in that type of neighborhood, there are a lot of larger than life characters like that, man. That if you were to meet them in real life, you're like, wow, if they were to put someone like this on screen, you would think that it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Remember when Snoop at a time was hanging with that one pimp who used to drive the Bishop Don Juan, that's a real dude. Like,
he was in like every music video with him.
That's a real guy who lives his life like that every single day.
And who really dresses like that, by the way. Every morning he wakes up and the pimp hat, the cane, and
man. I mean, I grew up with some pretty colorful characters.
You sent me a picture the other day with a very colorful outfit.
Which one?
I think you were going to a dance, or I don't know if it was a dance or something. You were wearing white gloves.
Oh,
yeah, you definitely. I understand that that was kind of the neighborhood,
Per our mullet conversation.
Yeah, you had a ring over the white glove.
Dude, I had gold chains over the
over the tie. I gotta say, it was. It was a different frequency.
Yep.
And I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
I'm in.
You're in?
I'm in. You call me to hang?
Yeah.
I'm going to my closet and I'm doing the same thing.
I mean.
And for those of you who are wondering what we're talking about, sometimes we send each other funny pictures of our past or something. He came across a picture when you went back home or something. And
I went back home, and my mother always tends to break out, old magazine articles and old photos, and she came across a photo. I stood up in somebody's quinceañera, which for those who don't know what a quinceañera is somebody's sweet 16, right? But 15. And this was, Wilmer and I have had multiple discussions about mullets and Drakkar Noir and everything that pertains to that time period. And I came across a photo of me in a quinceañera with the most killer mullet you'll ever see in your life.
Freddy, it was so iconic.
I was like, I gotta send Wilmer this photo.
Freddy, I want you to understand that things were different in my house. I want you to understand that things really changed.
Yeah.
And I will be honest, for the better.
Yeah.
For the better.
Yeah.
I'm a believer.
Yeah.
And I'm a believer. And you brought a level, you upped the game to such a degree that I owe you one. I owe you a picture back. Because I'm going to tell you something. You're going to realize how much we were cut out of the same cloth. When I give you my picture, it's going to be...
it better be as iconic.
Oh, no, it's a legend. Mine is an immortal legend. When you see what
you've shown me some of your old headshots.
Yeah, no, they're a problem. For me, they're a problem.
No, it's very indicative.
I have one photo. I have one photo that I think might actually not only brings us back together, well, we might move our families together. Like, we might have to move into the same property because we're the same fucking dude.
Yeah. Okay, so Scarface is your 3. I think for me, my 4 or my 3 would be There Will Be Blood.
Wow.
Yeah, there's something about that movie that I can just right now I can just go watch it. And there's just something, like I said, I don't know if it's the alchemy of it with everyone involved and his performance. There's just something that's so magical to me about the way that film is executed. And Daniel Day-Lewis, right? He's one of those actors that every time he does something, it's so magnificent to me. You know, I just think it's a wonderful film.
Right. I think I would say like Rocky.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you think about those movies that became prototypes when it comes to like the underdog stories, I mean, they made probably 200 movies.
Right.
That had this underdog story, 2 that had a training montage. Right?
Yeah.
You know, and you think about like this, you know, single-legged guy who goes against all odds, you know, and also that was a prototype for every sports movie. Every sports movie, those acts were identical. If you think about all the, you know, losing, then winning, then losing again to still as a win, you know?
Yeah.
You know, that little sequence, I think, was part of that prototype. And I think Rocky, what it did for me was, you know, it became this inspiration. I mean, even, you know, we were talking about earlier how Stallone, you know, was able to champion that movie and get it made, and stood by his, you know, he stood his ground and said, no, I got to play the guy.
Yeah.
No one can play this guy but me. I know what I got to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I wish he never died in any of the last Creed movies.
Yeah.
You know, like and I also wish that he wouldn't.
Then what would he have done though? Like what? Like you wish he wouldn't have died, and then what? He would have still been the trainer. Like, come on.
I think he could have been like Mickey, you know. But also, I also like he went through such turmoil. Like I wish it would have just been like a happier ending for him because he gave us so much. I feel like I wish that he would have retained some of his money. Like, why did he have to be broke? Why did he have to be sick? Why did he have to be all those things? Like, is it because most, you know, boxers end that way?
It's indicative of...
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But what if it didn't, right? Like, what would it done to the boxers of the future?
Right.
You know, we could have kept a little bit of my money and, you know, he had a restaurant, dude. What happened to the restaurant?
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, so to me, it's like for him to die alone, it's kind of crazy. I don't know. I don't know. But I get why it feels like smart. But, you know, there's some boxes that are made, you know, I mean, look, Oscar has a promotional thing and, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, but I think Rocky to me, when you think about a movie itself, that's another one that painted such a realistic interpretation about what his world was like.
Yeah.
Even the moment where he's like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And he just pulls up outside the window of the priest and goes, I just wonder if you can give me a blessing. I got the biggest fight of my life. And, you know, I just want to make sure I come back in one piece, you know, like whatever. Yeah. And I think that was like, oh man, like this is an Italian guy. Got to go to the priest. I got to get a little blessing before I go do my thing, you know?
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that movie. I just saw, we were talking about Robert Rodriguez, and when we were working together, he had went out of town for something, and he came back, and I was like, well, where'd you go? He goes, oh man, I went to go meet with Stallone. He showed me his new movie, his new Rocky, and this is the one that you're talking about, that he had the restaurant, the one with Milo
Ventimiglia.
Yeah.
By the way, big shout out to Milo, one of the most amazing people.
Oh, okay.
Great man. Incredibly talented.
Oh, we gotta have him on.
We should have him on too because he's just amazing.
Yeah.
Great stories too. Like, he's awesome.
We gotta have him on.
He's one of my favorite people.
He had come back, and mind you, there was a big gap, right, between the previous Rocky and that Rocky, the one that he was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him coming back and saying to me, I mean, I just saw Stallone's Rocky, which he, you know, stepped back into the director's chair. He directed it. He wrote it. This was like his baby again. And I don't know why. I think maybe because the Rocky that was prior to that, what was, I don't know. I just didn't think it was great. I was a little cynical, man. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, really, man? He's like, no, dude, I'm telling you, it's really good. So I was
What
like,
was the
okay.
storyline of that one again? They had the restaurant, right? And
He was just like, oh, you mean that one with Milo?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Adrian dies,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you kind of see him visiting her grave,
Right,
and he's just like a washed up boxer who tells stories at a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And then God, what's that? It's a real boxer who was in that movie comes back, and they're like, hey, it's just sort of an exhibition fight, and he kind of steps back into the ring with this guy.
Mickey Guns, right? Or whatever his name was. It Tommy Guns?
No, that was the one.
The street brawl, right?
That was the one that was before, yeah.
Yes, that was an unfortunate
This one,
catastrophe. I still liked it, but
it wasn't. So that's why I was cynical.
But it's the guy with the video game, right? They're like, oh, in the video game, Rocky beats this real boxer.
Yes.
Right? And then they're like, well, let's do an exhibition. Let's see who really wins, And he's like, don't do it. What are you talking about,
But what was so genius about that movie, and I was, like I said, I was cynical, was that Stallone made it like this really deep father and son story, and like the loss of his wife's story. I wasn't expecting her to be dead, and I remember watching it on the plane and going like, all right, Robert said this movie's good, and I put it on, and dude, like a quarter into the movie, man, I start freaking crying on the airplane.
That's Stallone, dude. He knows how to, how to hit the strings.
And a tear comes down, and I'm like, oh my God, here I am on an airplane, like crying in this movie.
The speech, too. The speech that is played in every gym and it's written on every wall, It's, nothing's going to hit you harder than life.
Yeah. Yeah, Stallone is brilliant at that. But that's a good one, bro. Well, all right, since we're talking about boxing, like Raging Bull.
Oh, my God.
Is another one that, to me, you rank Scorsese, Goodfellas, Raging Bull.
Yeah.
Like that's another one that I've seen 30 times, and I can put it on right now and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about the execution and the simplicity of that, right? But as we talk about sort of a boxer's trajectory, I felt it was very indicative of a boxer's trajectory, right? Ending up as that guy, he's like 40 pounds heavier, and he's like at a restaurant telling stories.
I think De Niro said then in an interview was like, "I'll never do that again." You know what I mean? He was like,
the weight.
He's like that was a challenging thing for him to do.
To put on the weight.
Yeah.
I do it all the time, man.
I don't like De Niro. I don't know what you're talking about, man. It's very easy for me. 3 weekends, man. I get you. Say action. I'm ready. Okay, for this fourth movie, the final installment into this 4-movie journey.
Yep.
Let's pick something now that is so unexpected. That somehow was original. I think like those movies kind of fall in the 80s sometimes for me. It's like those colorful movies, like I think like the
like what resonated as a kid,
like Back to the Future. Right? Let me see. Back to the Future is one that really and I watched all of them. I just love the Back to the Future movies. It's like, wow, that's really possible. Terminator. Predator. Those movies that like were just this singular stamp of like, you'll make this movie again with different actors and different monsters, or you make this movie again with, in the future, it'll time travel with different, with the same formula. Don't change, don't mess with the past,
right? And
don't definitely mess with the future, right? Like it's always kind of something. So what would be one of those for you?
Ooh, man, and we're talking about movies like when we were kids, like. Man, I remember watching like The Last Starfighter. You ever see that one?
Very good.
Or Gremlins.
Gremlins, bro, that's another one.
Or The Dark Crystal. Did you ever see The Dark Crystal?
The Dark Crystal gave me nightmares.
I just miss those movies, man. I miss those type of like big Spielberg
and practical stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like the puppeteering and the thing that made it feel like you could touch it, that could exist,
Yeah. I miss those, man. I miss those types of movies, and and the storytelling was always really good on those. But I don't know, have those been replicated? I'm not sure. That's a really good question.
I mean, when you think about like see how you talk about which ones did you say? You said Dark Crystal.
Yeah. Never ending story.
Never ending story, right? You think about
Back to the Future,
also
Gremlins.
like, the Harry Potter movies, right?
Yeah.
Dark Crystal. Really, like,
Yeah.
these are movies, these are books, really kind of like have inspired this in multiple generations, but the tonal of things of these movies, where the never ending story. I mean, I think about, what's another one that could mimic that? Again, these movies were so original. They were hard to duplicate, but that's the formatic or blueprint of the narrative was replicated with different journeys,
Yeah. I'm trying to think what would be one that's, I mean, any of those, like we were just talking about, like The Working Man that just came out, shout out to David Ayer, who had a hit movie out. But I like that they're going back to like that kind of 80s, like the guy, like you just named a slew of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like Singular Man movies, like I love
Commando.
Commando,
man. Another father and daughter's story.
Yeah. Listen,
True Lies.
I just saw True Lies the other day. Man, probably the best stunts, the best I've ever seen in
the
a movie
Harry,
before.
the plane, what was it? Oh, come on, bro.
I mean, that movie gives me anxiety, man. I'm like, it's so well. I mean, what movie have you seen after that has had real stunts like that? And everything's
the only one,
now, right?
and it basically doesn't even fall anywhere near this category, would be Rush Hour. And that one is a prototype of Lethal Weapon, but a lot more comedic, right?
Right.
Lethal Weapon got it right.
Yeah.
It got it right in so many, and that was Donner, right? The producer and director. But
I miss those movies, man.
yes, I mean, there was something very, very organic and real about those. You talked about Gremlins, that movie to me was so crazy innovative. Like just those puppets, those things, those things were really bananas. The fact that they couldn't eat after midnight, that you couldn't have water on their skin,
So what did that mean? They couldn't. And we was having this
if they eat after midnight, they
but until what?
monsters.
Until sunrise. But then after sunrise, they could eat.
Well,
like every day is after midnight.
Yes. Well, it's like I think that the science was that like like if they somehow ate after midnight, they become these monsters. And I don't know what the metaphor of that was. I think we got to look up what the metaphor.
But was it
is.
like midnight to like sunrise?
Yeah, something like that. But because then it was a one long night of hell. Right? And I think that's kind of what it was. And then Gizmo also, you couldn't put water on his skin because he will multiply.
Yeah.
But all that stuff is going to.
Can you believe that's considered like a Christmas movie?
Yeah.
I was trying to watch that with the kids this Christmas, and they're kind of like, "That's a Christmas movie." I'm like, "I guess it is, man." I really wanted to watch it this Christmas.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah. I remember that one. I remember having that one on video cassette. Yeah. Did you guys have that in Venezuela? Yeah. Like just the collection of that you just. There was something about having the video cassettes when I was a kid. It's like, well this weekend, although I've seen it 10 times, we're going to rewatch it again.
Yeah. I watched...
What'd you have on video cassette in Venezuela that you
Cobra.
watched? You had Cobra?
And I played that out, bro. I used to love that. You're the disease, not the cure.
Yeah. I remember we had like... Remember Death Wish 1 and Charles Bronson... what was Chuck Norris's franchise in the 80s?
Oh, he had SEALs, right? Wasn't he in like the Navy SEALs or something? Strike Force, wasn't he? It was like
a Delta Force.
Delta Force, that's what it was. Delta Force, that's what it was. And bro, like that motorcycle had missiles.
Did it really?
Yes. There was a motorcycle. He rolled into that town and he just fucking shot missiles out of the motorcycle.
No way, man.
Yes.
Oh, Delta. Oh man. I just remember my dad watching all that. You ever seen this documentary called Electric Boogaloo? And it was about the company that produced all those movies. They were called Canon Films. These two guys from Israel, and they're the ones who did the Break-In movies, but they did all the Death Wish movies and Porky's and like, they brought all that stuff from Israel.
Porky's, wow.
Or Porky's,
wow, dude.
Crazy.
I mean, I hope that everyone who's listening or watching us now can literally just grab a little piece of paper, write down all these movies. If you haven't watched them, if you've never heard of them, treat yourself to the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Not just as we know it, but as it's been recreated over and over and over again in the likeness of all the movies.
You
we
think
just
they could do
mentioned.
They can do a Porky's now. And what about your boy Tom Hanks, Bachelor Party? Did you ever see Bachelor Party?
Bachelor Party.
We had that on video cassette.
That's amazing.
Watch that over and over.
By the way, think about Risky Business.
Risky Business.
You make that movie now?
Right. What was the premise of that movie? It was
parents go out of town. Yeah. He throws this party, but no, he starts I think he starts in an escort business or something. Does he have like all these this dancers of the night and something work at his house? Remember, like he just started a business with I gotta remember what's the log line, Leo, on that movie.
Ecstatic when his parents leave on vacation for a few days, high school senior Joel Goodson cuts loose with his best friend Miles. After an attempt at securing the services of a prostitute goes slightly awry, Joel hires gorgeous Lana for a night of delight. Stunned by the amount of Lana's bill the next morning, Joel grows frantic after he crashes his father's Porsche. In an effort to raise lots of money fast, desperate Joel turns the house into a brothel.
Yes! Wow. Come on, dude. That's one of Tom Cruise's biggest pop culture movies of all time. And people don't remember that. Remember that premise. They only, when they think Risky Business, they only think about him sliding across the floor in the socks and in the dress shirt. That's the only thing people remember. But if you listen to that tagline, come on, man.
He was a pimp.
Yes, you could have made that movie now. He's a teenager pimp.
A teenager Tom Cruise pimp. That's
kind of insane, right? That's a pitch.
Here's my pitch. Tom Cruise is a teenage pimp.
Can't wait for him to do this.
Dude, you know what else we had on video cassette? Did you ever watch Revenge of the Nerds?
Of course.
I mean, eventually
wasn't Paul Feig that as an actor? I think Paul Feig was in it.
Was he really?
I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, Tim Busfield and but the original one is so well executed, and then you see 2 and 3, and they kind of
they made a lampoon.
Yeah. They became kind of caricatures of themselves, but the first one was so grounded. Yeah. James Cromwell was in that movie, and Anthony Edwards from ER. He played one of the nerds, and James Cromwell played his dad in that movie.
You remember Stand By Me?
Yeah, of course, man.
I mean,
Rob Reiner directed that movie.
That movie was in theaters, dude. And you couldn't make that movie again right now. Like, could that movie ever be in theaters again?
It was 4 kids. They go on this thing. They find a dead body.
Right. See what I'm talking about? See the coloration. See the common denominator about these movies?
Yeah.
There was something really life-altering happening. It was rooted in the environment. It was rooted in their journey as people. And, they don't write characters like that anymore. They don't write stories that are that deep, poignant, and like that hard-hitting.
Yeah.
It's a shame because Stand By Me is like, what if? What if you come across that? And that cast.
River Phoenix, Jerry O'Connell. Yeah. Like, man. Rob Reiner directed that movie. Yeah. So well done. Oh man, you know what else? We had Field of Dreams on video cassette.
Bro.
You ever see Field of Dreams?
Yes, of course. If you build it, they will come.
Tim Busfield was also in that movie. He played the I think was he? Yeah, I think he played
I think that's Kevin Costner's probably most iconic movie, right? I mean, Untouchables was great.
Yeah.
Was it Dancing with Wolves? I think was pretty big for him too.
Yeah.
Which one do you think? I think Dancing with Wolves was probably the biggest, right?
Yeah. By far. But
I love him in Untouchables.
Yeah.
But that was like also very popcorn, right? Like
Field of Dreams was so like original, and I don't know if they've remade that one at all or even taken the blueprint.
He's done a few tributes to it in Major League Baseball where he walks out of the field and audiences just go nuts because
you mean in real life?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was very cool.
What else did you have on video cassette?
In video cassette, I had Stand By Me.
Yeah, me too, man.
I think we've talked at extent about RoboCop. I've had RoboCop. I had
RoboCop.
Yeah, RoboCop is a big one for me. That one's one that I used to watch. I've said this many times before, but there was one movie theater in the small town I grew up in Venezuela, and they play RoboCop all year round. So that's the movie I will go watch in the movie theater. What else did I have? I had Cobra. I had Rocky. I had Terminator.
Of course.
Terminator is like a staple. You had to have that VHS. And then other movies that really kind of mind-bended cinema at the time. I mean, Jaws.
Yeah.
Right? Like Jaws was the prototype, the monster you don't see.
Yeah.
Until it shows itself at the end. Accidentally, but also now on purpose in every movie.
Did they ever play the Warriors in Venezuela?
Yeah.
That movie.
Warriors, clink, 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 come out and play.
That had a profound effect on me. We had family in New York during that time, and I was like, whoa, that's how it is in New York? Mm-hmm. Pre-internet, right? Yeah. It was like my perception of what New York was like. That Walter Hill directed movie, excellent.
Mm-hmm. Occasionally in Halloween, you see people, bringing those costumes back, and I think some people are like, "What is that?"
The baseball furies and all that. Yeah.
Those movies are, I think when we start really thinking about those films and not just the role they played in us as artists, but also just the audiences, just simply as people that just went to the movies or watched the movies. It really redefined cinema, and I hope that that the innovation of those movies doesn't stay in the independent film world. Like I hope that it makes a comeback to cinemas, to the theaters, because nowadays, streaming is the place for a lot of these movies, and sometimes it's really hard to find them. There's just so much out there available. But the theaters was a beautiful experience. Occasionally, you see anniversary screenings of some of these movies, and it's beautiful to re-experience it in theaters. But is there any other movies you want to share?
What else? What else had an effect on me? I remember in high school, like I had Deep Cover on on video cassette. Did you ever see that? Mm-hmm. Lawrence Fishburne and Jeff Goldblum. Such a great film.
Oh, speaking of Jeff, The Fly.
Oh yeah. David Cronenberg.
Like, come on, they don't make movies like that anymore, man.
No, man. No, they don't. Isn't that a shame? They don't make movies like that anymore. I hope we get to a place where commerce and art starts to strike more of a balance more,
Or that art, or not, I wouldn't say art, but our industry gives audiences a little more credit.
Yeah.
You talk about if you build it, they will come, right? Yeah. Like that's, they only feel safe producing those at independent films, because they feel like people want massive world-ending stories if you're going to bring them to the movie theaters. But occasionally there's runaway hits like Get Out, where like that was incredibly, original, but they're not betting on those horses anymore, right? So I think we're gonna have to just slowly really kind of champion with that, and all of us have to create kind of a network of actors and artists that are saying like, hey, let's stick by this, let's make these movies, let's prove that the audiences are have been waiting for this to come back to cinema. So we'll see how it goes, but either way, this was another really fun conversation at Dos Amigos. Thank you everyone for listening, and send us your movies. Tell us what you guys grew up watching. We love to hear that.
Yeah, what you grew up watching, what was in your video cassette drawer, what was in your DVD drawer, I want to know what you grew up watching and why those movies resonated with you.
Absolutely.
What's a video cassette drawer?
You Gen Zer, you Leo.
Yeah, no, Gen Z wannabe. That guy's a 3-6 Mafia over there, right?
True.
So wait, what are you? Are you Gen?
I'm a millennial. I just
millennial, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, until the next episode of Dos Amigos, I'm Wilmer Valderrama.
I'm Freddy Rodriguez.
See you on the next one.
Peace.